You are all going to die tonight.
Evil Dead is a 2013 remake of Sam Raimi's classic horror film, The Evil Dead. So the reason why I'm reviewing this film is because it's a $50 patron request from my cousin Christian Munoz. He really wanted me to watch this film, and I was like, I already watched this film. I watched this film back in 2013 when it first came out in theaters. And he was like, you know what? Watch it and review it anyway. So I was like, alright, I'm up for that. And I gotta say, I'm kind of glad that he asked me to review this film because, like I said, the first time I saw this film, and the only time I saw this film, was back when I was 19 years old, and I watched it in theaters. I'm 26 now, so I've obviously grown a lot in terms of my knowledge in filmmaking, my taste in filmmaking, and just film in general. So for that reason alone, I was still incredibly interested to give this film a watch. And now that I've given it a rewatch, I definitely don't like it nearly as much as I did back when I was 19. Don't get me wrong, there are aspects of it that do hold up and I actually do enjoy, but honestly, the majority of it, I can't really stand behind and defend. And usually I don't really start with the negatives, but I can't really help myself this time, so I'm just going to start with a few negatives. Really the main negative I have with this film is the writing. I just think this is kind of a poorly written film in a lot of different ways because pretty much all the dialogue in this film and all of the characters are incredibly artificial. Like, really nothing seems genuine in this film. All the dialogue is either just, boring by the numbers kind of dialogue, or it's just like expositional dialogue that is desperately just trying to give information to the audience and trying to get them acquainted with who is who and just convey information regarding people's pasts and their connections with each other. But honestly, I think in terms of writing, one thing that I thought was interesting was the concept of centering the main character around trying to overcome this horrible drug addiction and kind of attempting, at the very least, to make it somewhat allegorical to the horrors of withdrawal and, again, trying to overcome that horrible addiction. But unfortunately, this film ends up taking itself way too seriously. And it's like one thing that made the Sam Raimi films so incredibly entertaining and special is not only that they're like low budget and he did so much with a low budget, but they don't really take themselves that seriously. They're just really fun horror films that still manage to be disturbing in a lot of different ways. But overall, they're just really fun, campy, and disturbing type of horror films that have a shtick and it knows what it wants to be. And it's just something that really works for the overall approach of what it's going for in a more conceptual sense. But this film basically does the opposite of that and tries to make a serious type of film that still has all of the like fun guts and the gore and just over-the-top violence, and I don't think those things really meshed well in this film. Not that they can't ever mesh, but in this film, I just feel like the execution doesn't really work. But I will say that the violence and the gore and all of that good stuff is honestly what makes this film somewhat enjoyable. Like, this didn't feel like a pain in the ass to get through just because of how committed they were to making the violence and the gore over the top, just like it was in the original Evil Dead films. And I think that is something that really keeps this film afloat and makes it somewhat entertaining when it's happening, because when it's happening, you're in it, but once it stops, you're kind of right back to where you were, which is just having this boring, really flat, manufactured kind of Hollywood type film. And that's kind of a shame because the violence does hold up really well in a lot of different ways. Like, one of my favorite scenes is when one of the characters has her entire arm trapped beneath the car, and just the way it captures her slowly just ripping it off and pulling it out was something that I thought was just completely rad. And there's many other moments like that in this film that make it really fun to watch. But unfortunately, that's not really enough for me to sit here and tell you that this is a good movie, because I really don't think it's a good movie. And when I was watching this, I was like, I could just be watching The Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2 right now. Or even Army of Darkness. I think all three of the films are just really awesome movies. But, like, I just don't think, like, I really got enough out of this movie to justify its existence. And that was kind of a downer, because I remember watching this in theaters and thinking, yeah, this was a really awesome and respectful homage and adaptation of the original Evil Dead movies. Now, I honestly just don't think that way. The writing and the overall execution just isn't there for me. And I understand that, granted, it has to deal with a really cliche setup, because The Evil Dead, and I'm sure it wasn't the first film to kind of have that, you know, oh, just go out to the evil cabin in the woods setup, but it's definitely one of the pioneers of doing that. And this film obviously has to deal with that kind of cliche setup in its own way, so I get that can be a kind of a difficult task to kind of portray and execute, but it just isn't clever or fresh enough with it. Like, it honestly almost doesn't really even try. And, like, the part where the guy reads out what's in the Necronomicon, there's so many obvious red flags when he's reading it that say, it's not even a red flag, it just blatantly tells you to not read the words that are in the book. And you cannot miss it. It's not like it's like tiny and he just like somehow was missing it as he was flipping through the pages. He just decided to read out the words anyway, regardless of all of the blood written words telling him to not read it out loud. So, I mean, it's just little things like that that really drag the film down. And like, if it could at least find a clever way to kind of package it, then I would have respected and admired it a bit more. Jane Levy's performance in this film was actually pretty good, though. I think that held up for this film pretty well. And I also think the violence in this film held up pretty well. And honestly, that's probably the reason why I walked out of the film kind of enjoying it a lot more when I did, is because I just remember seeing something so incredibly violent in the theaters, and it was just something special for me to experience something like that on the big screen, because you just don't really see shit like that. I mean, sure, you get violent movies here and there, but you don't get these hyper violent films like this one was. So that's probably why I ended up enjoying it a lot more back then. But yeah, I mean, obviously there are some things about it that I did enjoy, but overall, I don't think this held up all that well. And honestly, it just makes me want to go watch the original Sam Raimi films. After I'm done with this review, I'm probably going to go and watch Evil Dead 2. So I'm going to give the 2013 Evil Dead remake a 5 out of 10.
Based on this motherfucker!
And honestly, that 5 is pretty generous. I was thinking more along the lines of like a 4 or a 4.5. But the violence is pretty fucking amazing, and I'm a sucker for some really great attempts at gore and violence in a film. And I thought, in terms of that, which is one of the reasons why I kind of do like the original Sam Raimi films, is how unforgiving it was with the violence and how over the top it was. I do like the fact that it was able to capture that kind of hyper-violent, over-the-top kind of approach. So I'm glad that at least they kept that spirit of it and transferred that over to the remake. So for that reason, I decided to give it at least a 5 out of 10. It's not fresh. Definitely not fresh. But anyways, that's all I gotta say about the Evil Dead remake. Happy Halloween, by the way. I don't know why the hell I didn't say that in the beginning, but it's Halloween, and this is the film that I watched on Halloween. And I hope everybody out there is having a fun but safe Halloween night. Don't eat too much candy, and don't do too many drugs. If you really enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and share it amongst your friends. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel to be updated on more film-related content.